So I'm James Smith. I'm a corporate lawyer that works with startups exclusively and with a firm based in Ottawa that works with startups exclusively as well. And the firm's been around for 15 years, and we do basically all the work that goes into like founding, funding, and exiting technology companies, knowledge-based companies. And I'm going to give you just like a very high-level overview, kind of what we do, and then I'm just going to let you ask whatever questions you want to ask. Hopefully I'll be of some assistance. And we have the type of model at our firm where we do a lot of pretty sophisticated transaction work, and it allows us to reinvest time with young startup teams, and no one is too young. No one is too early stage. We might talk you to maybe taking on the world just yet before you get, at least your first 5 users of your app or whatever, but or piece of hardware, whatever the case may be. But I really encourage you to reach out after this meeting if you think I can help you either network to people in town or to network with each other or to give some structure. Sincerely, we'll spend time with you. And try to get your resources. There's quite a bit of resources in Ottawa and Canada generally for startups now, and love to help you connect with that community if you think you're disengaged. So please take all of my email address, and I can give you some business cards afterwards as well. But please reach out. It's how we keep our funnel stacked with exciting companies. So okay, so there's the history. We do a ton of work. I don't know if any of you know any of these companies or these apps. They're sort of like profile exits where the founders made lots of money. This is our most recent one. Just to give you some idea, to give you some inspiration, it was founded 10 months ago, 12 people, high 2-figure million exit. Okay, just recently, in about a 12-month turnaround. So the bubble's kind of back, not like in our day when we're old, right? So we had the first bubble to enjoy, but it's modestly back. But just to give you some inspiration if you guys have some startup aspirations. That's the story. We just opened an office in Vancouver. We cover Canada. Anyway, enough about us. Okay, so I go back up. All right, so here's the deal. I'm just going to do 3 things. I'm going to give you the 3 basics of legal agreements and legal structures for startups. And I'm going to give you a scoop on like sort of the typical stages we see startups going through. And that's really driven by funding milestones or financing milestones. And then thirdly, I'm just going to give you like, again, kind of just a nutshell or a feel for the legal agreements at kind of each stage of product development or growth or whatever of a company, and they haven't changed. So you're going to hear nothing new. Okay? All right, first thing in terms of the 3 basics. There's really 3 key reasons, or 3 key things that we do at the early stage of formation. And the one is we want to create a vehicle for individuals to share outcomes. And companies are really good for that, okay? So basically our like long, in the mid-1800s, people came up with this idea of creating a fictional entity called a company that offered really 2 things. It offered a convenient, repeatable vehicle for people to share rights or to share claims against a particular group of assets. And it also offered limited liability for the owners for the business liabilities of the company. It's a pretty interesting and novel thing. It's only been around for 150 years, right? That you can be a shareholder in a company, and your company can acquire debts, like to lawyers, for example. Happens to us all the time. And guess what? I can't sue the shareholders of that company. I wish I could. I'd so go after those shareholders. I can't sue the shareholders of those companies if the company that I'm acting for doesn't pay its bills. So there's limitation of liability. And what it allows, it spreads a little risk around, and it just allows for a very efficient kind of risk-free mechanism to pursue your venture. It's a really convenient thing. And then the other thing that a company really offers is this ability to allocate rights amongst each other. So if you have 4 founders in your team, you can create a share capital structure, and shares are really like bundles of rights that you give stakeholders in your company against the assets of that company. And to be more specific, you're actually giving those stakeholders rights against the residual value of your assets after you pay off who? After you pay off your lawyers, your printers, your Las Vegas launch party show planner, you know, the usual thing. You know, this is like the startup world that you guys dream about, or whatever I dream about. I've never been invited to a Las Vegas launch party, so I'm hoping one of you guys come up with that for me. But it's really kind of, it really is that residual value. So if you have debt, if you owe banks, all your creditors come first, and really what those shareholders or those stakeholders of your company are sharing is that residual value you have to pay off your creditors. Make sense? So why do you incorporate? Why do you bother? It's an easy way to share claims. It's an easy way to organize allocations among founders. And you get limited liability with it. So that if you incur a debt of that business, then you're not on the hook for it. Okay? There's a few exceptions to that, mainly like stuff you owe the government. The government says, you know, you can stiff your lawyers, but hey, wait a minute, if you owe taxes, we're going to have some director liability for that. We're going to have some personal liability for that. So there's a few exceptions to that general limitation of liability rule, but for your purposes, those are the 2 main things about incorporating and why we do it, and why there's like an imperative to make a decision to do it at some point in the stages we'll discuss. Okay? Any questions on that? All right, the other reason why we incorporate, it creates like a bucket for everyone to dump their intellectual property, ideas, software, code, concepts, designs. You create a legal structure that acts as that bucket to house it all. That way you can like invite investors over and say, hey, look what I got in my bucket. You know, I want you to invest in this bucket. Because if you didn't have that like kind of convenient entity, and all those rights were spread around or just kind of tenuously licensed in for temporary periods, it's not like they're in the bucket, they're kind of like around the bucket, they're like on the beach, you know, you want them all like right in that nice tidy compartment. And incorporating a company and then having those individuals dump their IP in the bucket is a way for you to scale and kind of grow and show people what you got. Yeah.
So do you think it's the first step for any startup to incorporate in, okay, in other words, you can't say that we can just start as sole proprietorship and we switch when we are good to go to be incorporated?
Going to answer that question. I am going to answer that question, but let's talk about the stages first. I will say when people ask, I get that a lot, right? Like, so when do I do it? When is the right time? And the answer probably is like, okay, like where's the product at? Got an app in the App Store, you just kind of want to see what's happening, okay. Did anyone download it today? No, okay. Next day, did anyone download it? No. Third day, did anyone download it? Yeah, we got 3,000 downloads yesterday. Whoa, okay. Next day, we got 6,000 downloads. Whoa, okay. Next, again, I'm addressing this in an app context, and I maybe shouldn't. How many sort of software? Hardware? Okay, just nowhere. That's the first time I ever used that joke. That's a good one. All right, I got something today. I got something out of that. Okay, does everyone? So we'll talk about it again in connection with the stage, but it's more about like the momentum behind what you're doing. And the challenge is there really isn't a good alternative, okay? So if you choose not to incorporate, and if you choose, say, a sole proprietorship, the challenge is you need people to like contract with that sole proprietor, like give me your IP. You know, if you have is that your co-founder right here?
Yes, he's one of my partners.
One of your partners? We don't use that term. No, partnership bad.
Well, I mean, not partnership. No,
okay.
one of my co-founders.
Okay. So if he's your co-founder, you're going to say, okay, here's the deal. We're not going to incorporate yet. I'm going to own everything. So you just give all your IP to me. It's going to be my bucket. Don't get it. We're going to incorporate someday. So it's like creepy, right? It's a little bit creepy to say, I'm going to be a sole proprietor and you give me your stuff. So why don't we just become a partnership? Does anyone know? Anyone done a little bit of law? Why don't we become a partnership? What sucks about a partnership?
Well, this is what I meant. I mean, if I use the sole proprietorship, which is wrong, maybe partnership. But I mean, should we start as partnership?
But what's bad about a partnership? Does anybody know?
Well, liability it's not
right.
limited. There's no limited.
So it's unlimited liability, and it's worse. You're liable for his liabilities that he incurs that even remotely are related to your business.
Depends, say, on the share percentage, right? Assuming if there's difference there, the share percentage.
Yeah, if you put something in writing, you can control your percentage and stuff like that. But the main thing is that liability thing. You go out, you negotiate a like 10-year Amazon cloud thing and commit to spend 20 grand in storage over 2 years or something like that. And you guys are partners. That means you're on the hook when he jets down to, where would you go? Let me take a look at you. I'm thinking you'd be like Galapagos Islands kind of guy or something like that. You know? That's where you'd hide out, I think. That's where you'd hide out. I know where to find you. But I mean, that's the deal, right? Is that, and unfortunately, I would love like a tool, a pre-incorporation tool, like efficiently create little partnerships or allocations. It really doesn't exist in Ontario, or really any other common law jurisdiction. It mainly has the same partnership laws or tests that we have. And so we get this a lot of time. Can't we just do a term sheet, or can't we just do like a letter of intent? And the answer is nah. You can't. You can. It's better, to be honest, to have just like if you trust the individual you're working with, just to have a good understanding and a good handle on where those guys are coming in from, and then once the product feels even close to being like a real business, then I think you want to incorporate quickly. Facebook movie, same kind of thing, right? They started the product, got a bit of traction, got a bit of momentum, then they raced off and incorporated. Right? That's kind of what people do. And there really isn't a good alternative to that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, so number one, the three things we do, we incorporate. I've given you the reasons why. The other thing startups do out of the gate is they decide who gets what percentage of that company. Remember that sharing I talked about? And not only do they decide who gets what percentage, the very key thing is deciding what kind of conditions there are in terms of a founder's commitment level by which they earn that percentage over a period of time. Okay? And generally speaking, we lawyers love just like very simple time-based milestones. In other words, you commit to working for the venture. If your relationship terminates, if you quit, if you take a job at Google, then your vesting stops. And you keep the economic value of the stock that you vested. You leave your votes behind. Those votes stay with the other founders, so you can't really like vote your shares or do anything. But the bottom line is you basically keep the economic value of what you vested, but you lose everything else. You lose your votes and you lose any unvested stock. Okay? And anyone have any exposure with thinking about the time frames or market or anything like that for this sort of vesting concepts? Does anyone know what sort of like the general rule is? No? Okay. So for like public companies, it's sort of like 48 months. Stock vests over 48 months. Does anyone have like a gig with like a big company like Facebook, Google, anyone like that? So basically, if you get an option grant from any of them, you're looking at sort of like a 1-year earn-out period. We call it like a cliff. So in other words, you have to work at the company for a fixed period of time, and you actually don't vest any equity until you hit some milestone date. It's usually a year in a big company like that. Once you hit that milestone date of a year, then you essentially get credit or you get vesting of 1/4 of whatever that option grant is that you've been allocated. After that, depends on the company, After that, options typically, or stock grants typically vest on a monthly basis after that, over the rest of the term, over the rest of the 3-year, the 4-year total period. Does everyone kind of get that? That's sort of like the public company rate. With most startups, we usually compress that a little bit because you're not getting what? What are you getting at Facebook that you're definitely not getting at your startup? What do you think? What does Facebook offer that your startup is not?
Existing money.
Coin, bank, salary, fair market wages. So usually in your startup, you're not really getting salary. So we always usually have to reward people by narrowing that vesting period to like 24 months. And in return, they vest their startup equity a little bit faster than they would in a big company, because they're getting rewarded basically for being committed and not getting a fair wage. Okay? But one of the key things, again, is that among founders, what percentage are we sharing of this company we've now formed and we've dumped all our IP in? And what is the rate at which they vest, or how do we condition that in other ways? Does everybody get that? It's a really key thing. You look in startup blogs, resources, whatever, you're going to find a ton of information on best practices around that. Okay, so lastly, as I said, we incorporate, we create our sort of share allocations, vesting schedule. Last thing we do is create that bucket thing. So we need a legal agreement between each of the contributors of any kind, like code or ideas or whatever. And we create a legal agreement between the contributor and the company, and the contributor assigns all of the intellectual property rights relating to that venture. Doesn't mean you're assigning stuff related to other ideas you have or other business ventures that you have. You keep the drafting pretty tight so it's related to the particular thing you're working on. But you do create that bucket of IP that then the founders can shop to people looking to join and also make a contribution, or to people looking to provide capital to the venture, or whatever the case may be. Okay? So that's why we incorporate as like a first step to kind of achieve all those things. And really when we do like startup intake and startup, like the first 3, this is like the first 2 to 4 weeks of any kind of startup getting their kind of legal scrap together. And this is really the 3 things it does. Any questions on that? Okay. By the way, there's no money in this stage for the lawyers for startups. This is the help. This is the pay it forward stage for us. All right. Whoops. Wrong way. Okay. So then let's just talk about the stages of like a startup venture. So the first one, again, and I've given you like a very rough time horizon. And I've also given really a label to each of the periods of time, which is financing driven. And you might have a business which will never be like, will never like get venture financing or seed financing. And so this terminology might not necessarily apply to you. But I think it's useful. And like I say, if you're going to do the Las Vegas launch party at some point, probably you're going to feed yourself through this kind of stage or this kind of cycle. And I break it out into 4 segments. One is sort of the founding process, and that really is like finding a co-founder in class, or finding a co-founder online, or at a networking event, kind of talking about a business idea that you had, or an app idea that you had, or some code that you were tinkering with, or like, wouldn't it be cool if? And then usually, there's like, it's almost like forming like a band, or something like that. There's like some people that kind of nibble around it and then fall away. Some people that kind of get involved right away and really provide a lot of momentum to the enterprise. But that really is that entire cycle is on just like the product idea stage to like having something to kind of look at, or some business idea, or some research that you've done on a particular data set that supports a product idea, something credible, or some research you've done obviously in university, like a paper, graduate work, whatever the case may be, that just gives you the seed for like turning a problem that you solved into a business. That's really what you're looking at. identifying a problem, solving a problem, and then turning it into a business. And so that takes, again, usually 3 to 6 months. That can take years as well for people to get through. Again, back to the Facebook movie, they dramatize that as happening in like 2 days or something in the movie. You know, it's like soap opera children. You know, they grow up like at very exponential rates relative to human beings. But you know, when you think about Facebook, like, you know, their product was really about a 3 to 6 month product if you count like a couple of iterations of what they'd done and a couple of experiments that they made with some apps. It wasn't just that sort of hot or not thing. They did a bunch of other things too with the base that they had. So I think Facebook was the 4th product that they had pinged the Harvard community with. So anyway, it just gives you some idea, like that kind of experimentation phase is kind of a key thing, and it usually is the point in time where you get your co-founders and start to build your original team. So once you have a team and you've got a product concept, you really enter this next phase of trying to like get what they call like your MVP or minimum viable product. This is generally, again, more of a software focus kind of perspective when I use that terminology. But really, even if you're in a more complex, like in a life sciences or hardware kind of solution, you know, you still are in a stage where you're looking to develop some basic prototype or some basic concept, or again, it can be a data set itself that you're able to engage customers with. Like the beauty of software apps focus is that you've got like an audience of users out there that are like they're looking to get a piece of gum out of the box like every day. It's harder work to get engagement around like an enzyme treatment solution or whatever the case may be. It's still the same process though. You're basically trying to build a little bit of meat around your product idea that then you can use to get customer feedback and iterate on that product to then improve the preparedness of you to actually have a genuine working product that services the market, right? Just in software, it seems to have a few more exponentially faster abilities to do that just because of a ready audience. Doesn't mean you can't do it in life sciences. Doesn't mean that the exercise is any different. It's just harder. It's just more time, I think, because there isn't like and there may be some crowdsourcing other stuff where you do get feedback like that, or a peer group where you can. And so all that stuff that you do would be in that sort of stage. So that at the end of the stage, you essentially try to have a peer evaluated and a peer substantiated product that you're confident will like solve a genuine market problem. In other words, that you've taken your product concept and then you've kind of turned it into a validated idea. The next stage is this sort of seed investment stage. Generally speaking, what you're doing is taking that validated concept, getting a bit of capital, probably adding a few team members, and then you know, if you're in a hard goods or hardware scenario, life sciences scenario, you're probably trying to validate that with a pilot of some kind. If you're in an app environment, you might just be trying to add features or like add some marketing or add, you know, just test certain theses that you have regarding how viral the product can go based on what you do and condition the user base. It's all the stage of, again, just kind of starting to take that piece and like accelerate kind of the engagement, user engagement of your product. And then once you have once you kind of like crack the code, like you have a better sense of like expected outputs from the business inputs that you have. So in other words, I know that for every $1 I spend in AdWords, I'm getting $4 back in product revenue from my social media game, things like that. Or for every for every $1 that we invest in research in this piece, I'm gonna get $2 from Intel for NRE plus a possible license or whatever the case may be. But this kind of like, once you're in that sort of like real round stage where you're raising a lot of money, you really kind of need that, like a really firm grip on the expected outputs of the inputs that you have into your product, your business. Okay. Now, how does that match up like with your kind of legal situation? So again, this would be the stage where you'd probably incorporate at some point during this 3 to 6 months stage. You know, you've got the team members. You're able to allocate equity amongst yourselves. At this stage, if you haven't raised any money, you might be in kind of a bit of a pause from the legal standpoint. You'd just be adding maybe more people, more contributors that are donating IP and contributing into your bucket of IP. And then really once you start raising money, then we create essentially a set of agreements that provide a relationship both between the company and the founders and these external investors who aren't necessarily active on a day-to-day basis in the business. And so they want certain control tools, monitoring tools. They want some information regularly. And it's a whole set of agreements really just to support this sort of passive investment that they would make, right? And milestones and things like that, yeah.
I was wondering, is the difference between the seed investment and venture financing in the sense where the investors own parts of the company?
They will own part of the company in both phases. They will expect less of you in terms of your understanding of that coin operation. I put a coin in, I put $1 in, I get $10 out. So these guys will not expect that. They're still experimenting. All right? They're happy to give you your money. Not happy, but they're engaged enough in what you are doing to give you money to experiment. Okay? And venture financiers are far more demanding. Okay? I'm not saying you necessarily have to have it all figured out, but you have to have a nice, firm grasp on that coin operation concept that I described. Input, output. And they take really, they take a little bit of technology risk, but not a ton, really, in the modern age. But there's a lot of technology risk at this stage for an investor, right? You haven't figured out really whether your product is going to necessarily work for what you had thought. You're still in sort of the thesis stage. You got enough data to come up with a decent thesis and defend it, but that seed stage is you really kind of prove it. And that seed stage can last longer than I've described, but that's really how we kind of categorize ventures. Any questions on that? Now again, like most new ventures, in terms of where they incorporate it, it's right at the top end, right? When they start to form teams and things like that. And your lawyers make more money the further you go down the stage because the agreements get more complex and the number of stakeholders expands. From your little founder team of 2, you add 8 developers and you add 5 angel investors. And then you add 2 venture institutions. And then you add 15 more developers. And each of these people gets an agreement, and there's a shareholder agreement that ties everybody together. And so it just gives you a sense of these relationships as they multiply. That's where we start to have a more complex legal arrangements and that tie each of these people together. Yep.
Do you afford your legal team 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 month periods? I assume it would be expensive.
So you have to find the right provider for sure. But for us, what we count on is, what I haven't showed you is there's a thing called an exit down here, where people come out of the bottom end of that and sell their company or go public or whatever the case may be. So we have a saying in the office where we monetize when we can, and we help always. And so and then we're not alone, and there's other service providers that do that as well. And I think the idea basically is that we rather than make you manage to come up with a revenue stream that fits how lawyers normally work. We've managed the process to streamline it. To give you, and it's not free, I don't want to suggest that, but I'll be frank with you what the pricing is at our firm. So we would give founder teams, they would have to come up with like our we don't actually pay startups to start up with us, but they would have to pay our like out-of-pocket costs. And they're not insignificant. They're $600, $700, whatever the case may be, to like set everything up. And then usually they have to pay that usually within 30 to 90 days. And we ask the founders to make a commitment of $1,000 in the first 12 months. And it's really a way to discipline, like, are you ready? Like, you know what I mean? If it was free, like then, well, I'll take a comp, I'll take a corporation, yeah, I'll take one of those, sure. Sure, it's like picking a pen off, like, you know, it's like swag at a, you know, recruiting show or something like that. So there's a modest discipline, and the number, this $1,000 number, is just the number we've landed where it's like big enough to intimidate, but not big enough to intimidate. If you feel strongly about that you have like a real business, if I say, you know, you have to kind of pony up at some point at grand, people are like, usually like game for it, if they believe in what they're doing. If they don't, it's like, so you're not like willing to bet a grand? I don't think you got a real faith in kind of what you're doing. So go back, ping the market, get to where that point is where you feel good about it, or don't. You know, it's your choice, right? So, and then our big picture is you should be at this stage right here, having raised this money. In most ventures, their aggregate legal bill, I don't know if you'd be surprised by this or not, is usually about 8 to 10 grand, including the money it takes to like raise this money. It's peanuts. You know what I mean? And so really what happens for most startups we work with that we haven't like talked out of being a startup or mentored, we do a lot of stuff like if someone comes in and goes like, James, great idea. I hope no one has this idea, by the way. I'm about to make fun of it. Social media for pets. How do pets connect every day? You know, pets need a way to share pictures about their owners and interesting things that happened to them that day and the quality of their hoops and stuff like that. Like, you know, so pets need social media. And so we might say, you know, and we're super boosters, right? So even if you came in, did anyone have that idea? Oh, no. Even if you came in and had that idea, I would still go, that's wicked. I've never thought of that. Okay, before you incorporate, I want you to go talk to Scott Annan down at Mercury Launch. He's a guy that works with startups in Ottawa. He's got like a nice little incubator thing. Just go talk about your idea, get some feedback, and then let's chat in a week. Tee up an intro, go talk to Scott, you go down, pitch it. I phone you a week later, you're like, so how's that social media for pets thing going? Well, you know, James, I think it's a good idea. It will be done, and someone will make money on that. But I'm gonna focus on something else. I'm gonna focus on, you know. So that's how we, and sorry, I've given away my secret. Now you guys are gonna give me your business ideas. I'm gonna hook you up. But that's how we kind of deal with that. If we think your product idea needs a bit of sanding, there's a lot of resources that are keen to work with young people around here, and not just in university but beyond as well. And most of them are pretty supportive. And if you have the guts to like tee up a meeting or tee up a coffee or however you prefer to connect, even just a phone call like with someone in your industry and say, you know, I'm passionate about X. I think this has got the seeds of a business. What's your feedback? And you don't have to worry about NDAs and all that stuff with people like this. You just go, you get some feedback, and then it either encourages you or it encourages you to rethink the way you thought about that particular problem. And like, you know, again, I have a great business ideas all the time because I drive a lot, and that's when you get your best ideas, right? And so I have these ideas, and then I'm like, I go to networking events. I'm like, Scott, great idea. Social media for pets. And then guys just, poke holes in them in like 5 minutes. And it helps, right? It's a healthy dynamic. You do have to check your ego a little bit, but it's a really necessary and useful thing, and a really important part of that sort of a founding acceleration stage as well. The main thing about engaging the community locally for that kind of exercise is, I don't know if anyone's a golfer. Is anyone a golfer? 2, 3 golfers, that's a good sign. This is a good founder group. If anyone has ever given you advice on the golf course, like about your golf swing, they are invested in the rest of your round. Have you ever had that dynamic? You must have a good golf swing if no one's ever given you advice. You know what you should do is you just gotta like turn your back a little bit before you hit. And then the rest of the round, they're rooting for you the whole rest of that round. And that's the exact same thing in the startup world. If people give you advice, and especially if you're engaging about how you get it and how you give feedback on what you did with it, those people like root for you forever. And not only that, is you can build really great networks quickly. You know, just go to a few events. Just go, there's lots of crap. I just came from 2 events, and that's why I was a little bit late, I'm sorry, in Ottawa. And shocking amount of engagement for young people. And I think there's also a feeling in Ottawa that there isn't quite the integration that there would be in like cities like Waterloo or the Valley maybe with like students and entrepreneurs. And maybe geography a little bit. I don't know what your observation would be. But definitely when if you go to an event in the Valley, like there's just kids, like there's just students like you guys, like at these events, just chilling with whoever, like the founders of MySpace or whatever, just talking about what those people are working on. And it's shocking how aggressive, like I don't go to the Valley that much, but when you're there and you meet someone famous and you're kind of starstruck, and all they want to do is they want to know what you are doing. It's fascinating. Like, I met the original investor in Google, this guy, Andy Beckelsheim. I don't know if he spent a little bit of time in Ottawa, but anyway, he's like super billionaire and every right to be like cocky and all that stuff. And he's like all over me about like, what are you seeing up in Canada? What are people working on? You know, what are the kids doing today? You know, he's an older guy. But then like you're stunned, like that guy is getting information from you. And that is what, that kind of stuff exists. It's out there for you, and you just have to kind of get your comfort level and get out there and get it done. At worst, you have someone that you've met at a meeting before that you could email or ping or whatever to get feedback, to get product feedback in the future, whatever. So start your networking now. It wasn't sort of my meaning of my talk here, but definitely is my guidance. Any other questions just on stage? So you have sort of the startup legal basics. I've given you the stages of the usual startup, okay? And that's really it. That's all my talks. Okay. It's really all I wanted to do. Is that enough? I think that's, I don't know, is that hit the mark? Is there any more detail you guys want on any of the stages or anything else? Any questions? Yeah, what's up?
I mean, for us, let's say, to come and knock on the door asking for help at the beginning, do you really need a product to be ready, or just business plan for? No. I'm the same as all those people I just described, that if you want to just chat about what you're working on and what resources locally might be able to help you. There is one more thing I wanted to cover. But I can help with that as well. Like, I don't know, what's your product? It's an online service.
Doing, you'll tell me later sometime.
Yeah.
Okay. An online service, wow, that sounds adult. That sounds adult to me. Okay, one more thing about the acceleration phrase. Does everyone know like this sort of phrase like accelerator? It's like a phenomenon that has gone on in the last 5 years. No? Okay, I'm surprised. There is a like burgeoning number of either institutions or university entities that incubate companies, basically. So they take your team and they give you usually a little space to work from, a little bit of mentorship, and they usually have a program to try to spit you out of the back end of their program with that kind of minimum viable product and some preparedness to raise seed money. Okay? I'm just going to give you a few examples. There's one in Montreal called Founder Fuel. There's one in Ottawa called Mercury Launch. There's the Startup Garage here at the University of Ottawa. There's the Lead to Win program at Carleton. Is this a joint program? No. There's a Lead to Win program at Carleton. What else is in Ottawa? Oh, and then there's a program through Terry Matthews' company called Wesley Clover. And they incubate specifically students. So that's their market.
All this just funds and grants, or?
Those are, sorry?
Is this just funding?
Generally speaking, it's a small amount of investment for a small amount of equity. So there's this model. Sorry?
There's a vessel for those.
Yeah, it's not really like an incubator though. It's more of a resource desk for you guys. Okay. Just wait one sec. I'll finish the thought and then I'll call you. This model was cultivated by like Y Combinator, a Valley-based and Boston-based incubator, New York, I guess, New York, LA, and Techstars, and basically this model is kind of like you get 25 grand to buy a craft dinner or whatever, you get a space to work from, and you get like a very compressed time frame, sort of 3 to 4 months, to work your way through a product development cycle. There are hardware and software companies that go through these programs. And they've been very successful in just accelerating the pace at which you qualify a product for a particular market and get it ready. Get it ready to go to market. That's just what they're really good at. Again, tends to be, not why I said like software and hardware, it tends to be very hardware focused, right? It's like Dropbox was a Y Combinator company as an example, right? Bufferbox, does anyone know Bufferbox? It's a place where you get stuff delivered to you. It's a Waterloo company. It was through Y Combinator. But those are like physical companies that are in an online, environment basically or whatever. So it's a great program. There's essentially like an application process for each of those things. Lots of information on all of them. If you do need kind of to be at this stage, like right at the edge of the stage, to have some product, to have a little bit of market validation that you're doing something cool, and then they'll get you in and ideally get you ready for that seed stage, rather than in 12 to 24 months, in like 4 months. That's their goal.
Can I ask you about the name of that company in Montreal again? Fuel what?
Founder Fuel. Yeah. They take in about, I'd say 5 to 10 companies twice a year. So their current cohort started September. Their next cohort starts in March. And the application process is in October. So just look on their website for the application. If you want an intro to their founder, I can give you an intro to, not their founder, but the programs person. One other one is, well, there's several in Toronto as well. So one that's got a lot of press is something called Extreme Startups in Toronto. Same program, it's like 50 grand, you get a little bit more money, you give up a little more equity. When I say equity, I mean like shares or percentage of your company. But you get 50 grand in that one, same kind of program, 4 weeks. You have to get a mentor, you get to do all this product development stuff, that kind of thing. Really good companies there. They accept 4 at a time. So they have 4 in there right now. And usually these accelerators run either like try like 3 cohorts, 3 groups of companies a year, or 2 groups of companies a year. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what kind of things should you look for in an agreement / your incorporation documents?
Okay, so what do they do? There's like I say, those 3 pillars kind of like lay themselves out in like 3 things, right? So one is your incorporation document, okay? And so it's like a piece of paper that gets filed with the government, and it basically tells the government your corporate name, who the first directors are, and how, what kind of shares or what kind of like share capital you're making available to your shareholders, basically. So that's sort of like your government document. It's public. I could access it as soon as you file it. And that's the document that costs a bit of money to file. Once you file it, then you're a real company. You can stick that name into legal agreements and use that to contract with and that kind of thing. Okay, and you can do it yourself online. It costs, I think it costs $250 to do that, and I think it's another $200 to like register in whatever province you are. Like, so if you incorporate in Ontario, it's like $450. If you do a Canadian company, I think it's $250, and you have to do a registration in Ontario, so that costs $200. So the other disbursements, by the way, in case you're doing the math, are like this hardcore binder that houses all your corporate records, and I don't know, you remember what those things look like, violet things or whatever. And there's just like a few other kind of disbursement-y things, but some of that stuff you can do yourself for sure. So that's number one. That's document number one, your incorporation doc. It's called your Articles of Incorporation. Key document number two is this founder IP assignment. And again, that's the document that puts all the IP in the bucket. And then the third key one is just these restricted stock agreements or a vesting agreement of some kind, where you're giving stock out to your various founders, and then you're having the opportunity to claw some back or buy some back if they leave or whatever. Okay? If any of you want samples, email me, you get whatever you want. Okay? They're not, like I say, not a lot of money up there for the lawyers, so we're not like too protective of the paper and stuff like that. If you want to go off and organize yourself and raise money and just only talk to us down here, we're fine with that too. But anyone that wants a sample, I can give you our sample intake sheet. And our intake package basically is like a spreadsheet where you kind of like organize all this stuff, and then the actual legal agreements that go with it. Yep.
Maybe it's a little bit hard to answer this question because I know it depends on many factors, but if you had two ideas, right, you're kind of working on both kind of parallelly, but you're spending, let's say, 70% on one project, 30% on the other, and you are the same co-founders, same partners. Would you incorporate each idea as a separate company, or is it better to have both under one company?
Do you know? Yeah, so I'm going to answer the question as if the products are just not related and the team is not related. And really, you can only do one thing at a time. So if you have two good ideas, I think that's great. But you can really only get to this stage with one idea. So you have to choose. And so usually what I tell to people when I get that question, happens quite a bit, frankly, is get them both out there, see what's tracking or what's building momentum, and commit to that. Just commit to that. And then when you're ready to do that, I didn't get back to you, sir, and I will. Sorry about that. When you're ready and something's hitting, then you go with that, and you regret forever not pursuing the other idea, maybe, but it's not realistic to really seed a team or build both things. If they're related or whatever, maybe it's a more subtle answer. But assuming you're pursuing like an online service, whatever that is, and you're pursuing an e-commerce service, which is unrelated, I just, at the end of the day, you can ping the world out there a couple times, and see what's going on, see what builds, but you're gonna probably have to choose one or the other. Or keep them both as hobbies. I wouldn't say hobbies, like it doesn't mean that they can't generate, if you create an app that generates 10 grand in revenue a month, that's pretty decent living, right? If you create two apps that collectively generate 10 grand in revenue a month, who am I to say that is not like a good living? That is. You know, it's just probably not, you know, and maybe at some point you need to incorporate both. Probably you would once you start getting licensing revenues at that stage. But for like the kind of like team intense venture cycle, probably not a fit for like doing two in parallel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I was thinking about, once you have to kind of structure the company differently, if you're thinking there's a potential for the other idea to come in at some point in time. So you have to structure it probably a little bit different than if you thought this is I only have one idea.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm telling you is success is really often a factor of being very, very reductive at that stage. In other words, if you introduce variables that dilute your commitment to a single concept, single idea, single basic product core competency, you probably put a bullet in the huge success of either idea. So again, I'm not suggesting that you don't do two ideas with a more modest view, but if you want, you know, $100 million outcome, or $10 million outcome, $1 million outcome, even $1 million outcome is a significant outcome. Like for someone to cut a check for $1 million for you, you know, that's a significant buy, right? So, you know, so either you do that, you do that gradually and just say, hey, you know, I'm earning 120 grand a year, it's very stable, and I've got two products doing that, buy them for $1 million. So that can be done. I'm not suggesting it can't, but I think to your question, I think if you got these two things going, I hear it a ton, but you do have to be almost like ruthless with your time, and more importantly, like your kind of heart commitment to one thing or the other, because you have to like live, breathe, die the product every single day. Every person you meet, you have to talk to about it. You know, you have to like just, and that's what these guys are like, the guys that do it. I mean, they're like, not like guys you take fishing or golfing. You know, keep your golfing friends because you'll need them. You won't want to spend time around like the people that you share startup stuff with. Sorry, can I just answer his question first? Sorry, your question?
Okay, yeah. Let's say you work in a company, you find an opportunity, okay, and you tell the manager about it.
Never tell your manager about it.
Never. Let's say I told them about it. Okay, you tell the manager about it. He says, okay, yeah, maybe it's a good idea, we'll maybe do it in the future, we don't know.
Yeah.
We're kind of busy now. And then you leave the company and you start thinking about this opportunity, you really like it, you want to actually do it. What are the liabilities of me as a person doing an opportunity when I worked in a company not long ago?
So I think I'll give you the very stark answer is, for a junior employee, you have a reasonable amount of freedom to pursue tangential products, even if they're nibbling around the edges of like the product of the company that you worked at. You know, obviously there's a bit of a target on you on that company. I don't know if anyone knows like the Kik example that I showed. You can look it up. But we act for a founder named Ted Livingston in Waterloo, who has a great company called Kik. He was a co-op student at RIM, and he launched a product and then got sued by RIM, who alleged a bunch of crap based on his co-op term.
It's exactly the same.
Okay. 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 Well, that lawsuit is BS. Okay, and everyone in the startup world, almost, not to put too fine a point on it, but it certainly wasn't the reason that they've had struggled, but it was evidence of a culture that is the reason that they're struggling. Okay, and they would never and will never win that lawsuit. I can't prevent someone from suing you. I'm not suggesting that you can. And that's why I say you have a bit of a target on your back. But I think you should be quite confident that if you have not taken a chunk of code or modeled architecture on something you saw at a whiteboard at RIM, if you have a more efficient way of doing batteries that you had and had an idea, a concept that you learned at RIM. By the way, I want to talk to you if you do. But stuff like that is you are entitled to the residual value of your intellectual energy, okay? So you're entitled to incrementally build on your work experiences to then create value for yourself. That's free enterprise. That's what we're all about. And so if you avoid the smoking guns, hey, you took a chunk of our code and that's where it is. Or in a situation we had in Ottawa, the product diagram in your initial VC presentation is the exact product diagram that you presented to our customer 3 months before. And you know what? In your initial VC presentation, you actually forgot to delete the company logo on the bottom. This stuff happens, okay? That's just bad. Like, that's a bad thing, right? Got it? So delete RIM from all your, okay? Assuming it will be a company in the year or so it takes you to get through that stage.
Let's say it's an extension of something. It's about cars. It's not about phones.
Yeah.
It's because it was part of UNX, but it's an extension of their work. So I can start my business with no.
Yeah, I think again, would it be? Let me give you an example. Would it be through their developer platform? Like, would it require an API to the? Yeah, ideal. APIs are great. As soon as you plug in, you're kind of home free. You build an app that they've accepted into their environment, right?
Yeah.
Kik was the same way. They built an app that was plugged into their API, and then they said, oh no, all that stuff we signed and said, thanks for coming in, no, we're rejecting that. So they're like, that sort of acceptance project, it's like, it really helps you out to go through that sort of development program. So I think your risks are zero in your scenario. I think for any co-op, you'd have to be an idiot to start a lawsuit against a co-op student that never coded, you know, or whatever. I don't know what you did or what your scope of responsibility was. Did you code a little bit? Okay. A lot of co-ops don't, right? They just kind of watch and sit around. And co-ops are great. Be hungover is mainly what most co-ops I know do. But I think your risks are very low. And I think that Kik thing has been sort of universally ridiculed that they would do that. And it was more just about buying time for them to try to react to really the BBM market kind of collapsing underneath them, right? So that's that. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, at what point would you actually run to the patent office? Like, should you
I didn't talk about that
at all until you have a patent, or you talk a little bit about it and then try to test it off and then get a patent?
So I'm not a patent lawyer,
okay.
And so as a result, I'm not a patent guy. And I will say as well, our business over the last 10 years has become, you know, about 60 to 70% software. So most software guys aren't patent guys, frankly. And so I'm getting a little bit of an anti-patent bias. But I realize it's a different reality in different kinds of industries, both in terms of industry action otherwise. Like the bottom line is, you know, I think the right approach is in the founding stage, you have to decide whether you're the type of business where in order to get resources for what you're doing, people are going to expect you to have some registered IP protection, okay? And I can tell you it's not software, all right? Like if you have a pure software, pure app, whatever, I'd forget about it. I'd forget absolutely about it. Unless you have some miraculous engine thing or platform that is truly out there, I'd say no. If you're building a new battery and it's like nothing that's ever been done and it's powered by the radiation emanating from Mars, then okay. Then you decide that's something I need, and then you really have to allocate resources to probably do, you know what like a provisional patent is? It's like sort of half a patent. You get your foot in the door, and then you do, it's more important to have the strategy for this group than anything. If you never get beyond this phase with your business, doesn't matter whether you have IP protection, obviously, right? Like, it really doesn't matter. So I think what's more important is maybe to get the provisional started, provisional scoped, do a little bit of homework. The more important thing is to have a strategy. In other words, to have maybe an advisor that helps you develop like a core group, of, like a core functioning IP, and then just like a sense of where you might take that out and where you might protect that core. And there's a lot of good people in Ottawa that do that. Like you could have a slide with like my patent strategy and say, you know, provisional, working on a provisional, which means you phoned an IP lawyer and left a message. This is how you do this. You gotta talk yourself up, right? So, working on a provisional, you know, have the following patent strategy. Here's our core. Here's our whatever. Okay. Probably, you know, I think again, industry by industry, you have to be a bit sensitive, but generally speaking, you're able to get NDA protection from anyone you'd be concerned about in terms of the type of disclosures that you'd be concerned about. So you don't have to worry too much about, you know, blowing yourself out of getting a patent at all. Yeah.
Sorry, it's an IP question, but probably not answer. So what
I'm not a total dumb jock. I can handle some IP questions.
Okay. So, for example, Kijiji and Ottawa classified websites.
Are they online services, just for the record?
They are.
Okay.
So they're too similar, right? Like,
Yeah.
almost the same. What I don't understand, like, let's say Brixis, I think it was the first one, the first classified website. Would they like have they ever thought about suing Kijiji or?
But why wouldn't Yellow Pages sue Craigslist?
So the ideas are the same,
Right.
right?
The first person that created a list on a website, why didn't they sue?
Okay.
Right?
Cool. I like
You know what I'm saying? Like it's you know, the more important thing is definitely in the web space, especially, right? Is, you know, it's just engagement of people, and there's obviously a ton of engine technology that is subject to patents. They get negotiated every day, and even things like pop-ups and there's some crazy patents out there that we get notices all the time from people in Texas, and you know, you use the color blue in your website, and we own the web version of that blue. We have patents over that. You know, like it's crazy, some of the stuff, and oftentimes you freaks you out a little bit the first few times you get them, and then you know you show like a buyer like Salesforce or whoever, and you say, oh yeah, by the way, we got this notice, and they're like, oh yeah, we got that one too. That's a good one. That's such a good one. So you know, it's one of these things when you spend a little more time around it, you start to understand that there's a little bit of a gamesmanship that goes with the portfolios themselves, and they are completely empowering of big companies. You know, at the end of the day, I'm very cynical on the whole kind of structure of the current regime. I mean, that goes without saying, maybe, but I think for a young company, I think it's more about audience engagement in terms of raising money, and then identifying a little fence to put yourself in and create a little budget to kind of credibly handle. It's more of an area of proving your credibility than getting a substantive portfolio of registered IP that you can sue Apple because they will squash you like a bug, right? So, yeah, go ahead. So can I answer this one first? Yeah.
Well, still in the IP, I was wondering, do you have affiliates who offer services for
Yep.
registry?
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not quite as fee-friendly as we are. Yeah.
And then you must be still able to music licensing.
Yeah.
So,
That's easy because that's all by contract. Yeah, so we do that. We do a lot of inbound content. And I wouldn't say it's easy. It depends who you're licensing from. But
what about selling out licensing for original content?
yeah, easy to. And if it's online, it's typically done by terms of service and things like that that we do. A lot of music apps that we work with. Push Life and others, and even Kick handles some music stuff. So that's more straightforward. You don't need a registered patent lawyer. You don't need to register anything. You probably just want to, there's a thing in the States called the Digital Media Copyright Act, DMCA. You just register your company on the DMCA, and if someone sends you an email and says, that's my song, you rip it out of your thing. You don't ask questions. And it's a bit kind of sad, I guess, but it's a safe harbor for just as an intermediary of content. It's a safe harbor for not getting sued by third parties if you're handling third-party content. If it's your own, it's easy. You'll never sue yourself. Oh, maybe you will. Yeah, what was your last question?
Yeah, so let's say I'm developing a piece of software, and I found that I need...
For an online service?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll talk with you like offline in more detail, but for now, if I found that I need like graphic designer to do some stuff for my online service, and I have to explain in details for this guy about my idea, how can I protect my idea, not this guy take it and work on it somehow? There's like special agreement that I can, oh, this is my idea, I need your help, graphic designer, could you please sign this for me?
So do you know many graphic designers?
I'm looking for actually.
Yeah?
Do you have one?
They're not doers. They're not doers. If you ply them with alcohol and recreational drugs, you'll probably be just fine. Just kidding around. That was recorded. Oh darn it. So you can get an NDA from them. They see a lot of stuff. Most credible companies or guys would never have the skill set to do what you're doing, or the energy or desire or whatever. So you have to learn like a little bit of savviness about when to potentially sacrifice the momentum of just chatting with a guy, getting their buy-in, and getting the work done quickly, with the concern about them like taking your idea and marketing it themselves. And most graphic designers with a reputation and their profession.
Maybe I use graphic design, but let's say there's a feature in my software I don't know how to do it. I need someone to do it. I need to hire someone.
Then you need an agreement for that. Anyone touching code or anyone doing code, then if someone's giving you skins just for like logos and for websites, I'd say
yeah, no,
I wouldn't sweat that too much.
The thing is, the guy's reputation, with very good reputation, they try so much.
So, so if you're getting your graphic design in back alleys, then you definitely, it's like, dude, here's some logos. Then you definitely should try to get an agreement. Anyone touching the code, though, any feature, any set, James, can you give me a contractor agreement? I'll give it for you for free. Just you, though. No, I'm kidding. We would do that kind of stuff for anybody. Help always, monetize when you can, help always. That's our mantra. I'll meet you in a back alley. I'll give you the agreement. You pass the, anyway, never mind. Any other questions? Yep.
I read in the book that raising an investment from venture capital is not always good for the employees' psychology. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, you tend to attract an employee base that has the mindset that you have. And so you either have an employee base that is kind of like, let's keep as much of the pie as we can, and let's just grow it as fast as we can. It's kind of a Craigslist mentality. Or, let's try to get some resources from professional people who are really good at making things get bigger faster. And in other words, a lot of people I see in venture-backed companies have been in venture-backed companies before. They enjoy the pace, the culture, the basically idea of sort of the home run, kind of goal quickly. And then I see really, really stable, nice companies with nice teams where it's like, let's just do it at our own pace. And let's not get an investor that's going to make us go and do things or go at a pace that, either ruins our lifestyle or is just not what we're about as a company. But I think, I certainly haven't seen a negative impact, like an aggregate negative impact of a venture capitalist on a startup culture. Because that really is up to the founder. Really is up to the founder and the management team to set that tone. The investors don't get close enough. I don't know if you want to share an experience, but my own view is, I at least in the modern day, in terms of like what I see at the venture side, like they don't get close enough to screw up your culture. And most definitely like on the sort of softer side, like the software side and the Valley types, they're really into culture. They're really into like the Shopifys, like cultish, love for your place of work, right? Which is great, it's just not, you don't get that in every industry. Like, if you go to a defense contracting firm that does hardware, like, and start to do stuff like that, like people are a little freaked out. They need their own little space, like hardware engineers and stuff like that. So I think the answer is I would disagree with that book. It only would change a culture as much as a founder or management team led it. And then it would be that founder or management team's fault for letting it change if it was adverse. Anything else? Anyone else planning to get sued by their former co-op employer? Are you planning to get sued by your former co-op employer?
I wanted to expand on something. I saw some dynamics here, and I see that a lot from students. The concern about their ideas.
Yeah.
What has been your experience? Has your experience been that people steal ideas
No.
when you talk to them? Or,
No.
Is it good to share ideas?
Yeah, I think.
Should you be cagey? Should you be candid about them?
I would say it is the biggest sign of immaturity. When I say that, I don't mean like I have a 13-year-old. It's not like 13-year-old immaturity, but biggest sign of immaturity as an entrepreneur is this sort of tension around sharing information about your business idea. And the biggest sign of maturity and engagement is being completely forthright about everything with trusting someone quickly, and getting them engaged. And, again, like a lot of this stuff, right, is like in this founding stage, what can I get for free or near free? Introductions, advisor relationships, product validation. And if you're cagey, it inhibits the kinds of like engagements that you need to grow and get momentum behind what you're doing. And on the investment side, you kind of have to meet passionate people about what you're doing. Like you have to meet like-minded people or people that always wanted to explore that, or whatever the case may be. But if you are a bit of a if you're a bit chippy about how you get engaged with that person, like I need an NDA or else I'm not talking to you. It's just friction. It's just not a good kind of engagement. It doesn't like create people rooting for you, unfortunately. And you have no risk. You have no risk that that me or someone is gonna take your idea and then stop what they're doing and do what you're working on. An online service. Although I always have dreamed of an online service of some kind. And I'll be honest with you. I'm thinking of going to develop an online service as soon as I get home. As soon as I figure out what that is. I'm going to do that. But I'm just kidding around. Like you really, and again, if there's a strength of like any good technology scene in any city, is like just a ton of people sharing immature ideas and maturing them. and bouncing from contact to contact as you go about that exercise. And then as you go along, getting people and getting resources that help you make that thing a reality. And so if you add friction to that process, or you just reduce your equation of people that can help you. It's kind of like, why do you work with startups? Well, there's some funny math there. Why do you do work cheaply or for free? Well, if we didn't, it just reduces the algorithm to like a more finite universe. We'd still do some work at the bottom end, but there's just exponential stuff that goes on that I can't explain. So you're in the same boat, and the more you get engaged, the better, basically. Okay, was this a talk about law? Yeah, it was. Okay, I forgot about that. Did I talk enough law? Did you get enough out of it? If you didn't, you just phone me. I'll leave. I have cards and everything. I have a bit. No, I didn't. I forgot my cards. No, I have cards. I don't have cards. I'll leave my email address. And really do feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to help. So that's it.
Thanks a lot.
No worries.